You're watching The Legal Breakdown. So, Glenn, we've got a surprising new addition to Jack Smith's prosecutorial team. Can you speak on who it is?
Yeah, so it's a former federal prosecutor named Alex Whitting, and he has quite a resume that he is bringing to Team Jack Smith. So first of all, he was a deputy when Jack Smith was a prosecutor at The Hague, prosecuting war criminals for about 3 years. Whitting was his deputy in that endeavor. Now, Whitting also prosecuted at the International Criminal Court for a number of years. So it seems like he's the kind of guy who has dedicated much of his professional career to going after some of the worst around the world. He was also a federal prosecutor for 10 years. He worked at the Civil Rights Division at Main Justice, the Department of Justice in D.C. He also worked as a federal prosecutor and assistant United States Attorney's Office at the Boston U.S. Attorney's Office, handling organized crime and corruption cases. He spent several years teaching trial practice at Harvard. So, I mean, his resume is pretty impressive. And he's not just an academician. He seems like a real trial guy and somebody whose heart is clearly in the right place. So I think it sounds like it is a great addition to the team that will be prosecuting the federal crimes against Donald Trump.
With regard to him specifically, what does it say that a war crimes prosecutor is now working on this case? Why is this significant here?
Look, war crimes prosecutors go after some of the worst offenders around the globe, right? People who are committing war crimes, typically against their own people. We see the parallel, right? We see Donald Trump committing crimes against his own people in violation of the laws of the United States, laws that he is supposed to faithfully execute in the time he was president. And he orchestrates crimes that, in a very real sense, were designed to end our democracy, this great American experiment. So you know what? Prosecuting war criminals seems to be great and rich experience for somebody who is now tasked with, for the first time in our nation's history, prosecuting a criminal former president of the United States.
Now, would Jack Smith be adding prosecutors of this caliber if it didn't seem like he was serious when it comes to securing a conviction?
No, he is serious as a heart attack. I have the pleasure and the privilege of knowing some of the prosecutors who are on Jack Smith's team because they are my former homicide prosecutors when I was chief of homicide at the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. And I can tell you, these are some of the best, the most honorable, people with impeccable ethics and integrity. And, they mean business. And so, I can't wait for the first federal prosecution to kick off against Donald Trump in March that will be presided over by Judge Tanya Chutkin in federal district court in D.C.
You'd mentioned some of Whitting's credentials before, that he went to Yale to be educated, that he worked at the ICC, the International Criminal Court at The Hague. He taught law classes at Harvard. He was also hired as an assistant by now Supreme Court Justice Kagan. When you have this caliber prosecutor going up against whatever defense attorneys Donald Trump could cobble together that week, who know that they may or may not even get paid, when there's that much of a disparity, how does that impact a case? What's the practical effect of that?
That's a great question. It's clearly not going to be a fair fight once this case moves into the courtroom proper, because you're going to have some of the best prosecutors our country has to offer against a ragtag group of, third-rate lawyers that Donald Trump continues to burn through, every week. Here is the challenge that comes with that, though, Brian. As prosecutors, yes, we are representing the interests of the American people. We are working hard, but honorably and ethically toward a conviction. But we also want to make sure that the defendant enjoys competent representation. Effective assistance of counsel is what the Sixth Amendment right to counsel guarantees to all defendants. So sometimes I tell you, when I was prosecuting cases and the defense attorney, in my estimation, was really not up to the task, I had to sometimes make sure I did double duty protecting the rights of the defendant by not taking advantage of a defense attorney who really wasn't doing everything he or she should for their client. I don't think Donald Trump's attorneys like John Lauro, not particularly good. He has also been involved in spewing some disinformation into the public square, which I hope will stop soon. I don't think he's the kind of person who will render constitutionally ineffective assistance. But I don't think it's going to be a fair fight when you pit the team of federal prosecutors Jack Smith has put together against the only people that Donald Trump, can bring into the fold to represent him, and he ends up kind of stiffing them all, for his legal bills at the end of the day.
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, isn't just the facts surrounding this case going to do a lot more damage to Donald Trump than any counsel, whether they're good or bad? Or do you believe that, if Donald Trump was able to get together some competent legal representation, that it may actually make a difference? I mean, given the facts in this case, which don't exactly redound to Trump's benefit here.
No, take the best defense attorneys through all of time and assign them to Donald Trump's defense team, and they still would not have a shot of winning an acquittal, in my estimation. And part of that is because, people should understand that the rules of evidence govern what can and cannot be presented to the jury. So all of Donald Trump's admissions, his incriminating statements, his confessions over and over and over again in media interviews, at his hate rallies that he posts on his third-rate social media platform, they are all admissible evidence against him. But all the nonsense we hear him spewing out into the public square every day about how the Presidential Records Act lets him do it, no, it doesn't. About how he can declassify things with his mind, no, he can't. None of that is admissible evidence in a court of law. So once the rules of evidence are applied to the stuff that is being said by Donald Trump, he's got no defense. He's got no relevant evidence to offer. I predict it will be a bloodbath on the evidence once the prosecutors begin presenting the case to a jury. And I would look to the recent conviction of Peter Navarro. Peter Navarro was forever going on air and spewing all kinds of nonsense about all kinds of defenses he had to the two contempt of Congress crimes that were charged against him. He said, I have executive privilege. I'm going to win this case in court. The minute that case went to the jury convicted Peter Navarro's, so quickly that it made his head spin. I predict the same is going to happen when all of these federal cases move into court and Jack Smith's team presents the evidence to a jury.
Well, and the ultimate irony of all of this is, regardless of what attorneys Donald Trump does manage to cobble together, he already eliminated his advice of counsel defense by going on Meet the Press this past weekend and admitting that he makes all these decisions on his own volition, and that it wasn't just that he was listening to his attorneys. So even if he had terrible attorneys and he could just pin the blame on them, now he can't because of what he decided to say on TV apropos of nothing.
Yeah, he ties his attorney's hands every time he gives an interview. He keeps taking defenses off the table, defenses that he might have otherwise been able to present to the jury, like an advice of counsel defense. We may have talked about this before, but I think it's worth reinforcing. If I'm filling out my tax returns and I have a tax attorney or a tax preparer who says, Glenn, you're entitled to take that deduction, and then I take that deduction and I file my tax returns and the IRS says, Glenn, you were not entitled to take that deduction, I can legitimately raise an advice of counsel defense. My tax attorney, my tax preparer said I could take that deduction. That's a valid defense in the eyes of the law for some crimes, not all. Donald Trump could have raised an advice of counsel defense. Counsel said the fake elector scheme was on sound legal footing, for example. But as you say, he gives an interview to Meet the Press and he says, oh, wait, I rely on my own instincts. Well, guess what? There's no such thing as reliance on advice of instincts defense. So, Donald Trump really only opens his mouth to change feet at this point.
Yeah, I think that's well said. All right, well, we'll obviously stay on top of everything that's happening with this case as it continues to head toward trial. That trial date again will be in March of 2024, and now this will be at the hands of Jack Smith's newly beefed up team, including a new prosecutor who previously was working on war crimes. So, with that said, if you want to stay on top of this stuff, make sure to subscribe. The links are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching the Legal Breakdown.